Mr. Jobless, is dining bon, your mom delicious? That's how I was made fun of the other day by an interviewer I had met by chance at a posh restaurant. He had repeatedly insulted me in an interview. I had lived overseas for a while after graduating from college, and this interviewer made fun of me for not being in the US, even calling me unemployed. You're not doing him any favor by spoiling such a jobless guy, ma'am. The interviewer remarked, using the fact that I didn't respond because of the high-end restaurant's upmarket atmosphere. He even started giving my mother lectures. He had no idea that my mother would tell him, "It turns out you're the jobless." Just a few minutes later. Mark Harris is my name. I'm standing in front of a big building, looking sharp in a suit for a job interview. I'm in this building today for an interview with a company. I looked at my watch. 9:40 a.m. At 10 o'clock, the interview is scheduled to begin. I was pleased to be in front of the building 20 minutes ahead of schedule. I just got back from living overseas, so I'm quite pleased with how punctual American buses and trains are. 5 years ago, shortly after I received my university degree, I departed the United States. I enrolled in my university's economics department, but not because I was very interested in studying economics. I picked an institution that I could easily go to from my house. My grades alone allowed me to enter the economics department, which is the sole reason I ended up there. Nevertheless, I realized this wasn't what I wanted and felt more and more uncomfortable in each class. I had a dream, but for some reason I had given it up as impossible. I simply wandered around the institution. My mom got a job abroad at that point. Her departure from home was not unusual because she was a career lady who was constantly on the go. My mother has been away from home since I was a small child. But because my dad was constantly home, I never felt truly alone. My father is a writer, unlike mother. Although he appears to be a somewhat well-known author, my father is incredibly introverted and finds public speaking difficult. His rare public appearances earned him the moniker the Phantom Writer. Some even denied the writer's existence, speculating that he was actually a robot. By the way, the author's photo for his works is always a photograph of the cactus he is cultivating because my father doesn't like to have his picture taken. My parents were inseparable despite their disagreements. My dad's casual choice to leave with my mom when she had to work abroad was demonstrated by the fact that he only needed to pack their bags and locate his passport. As long as he has an internet connection, my dad can work from anywhere in the globe, he always brags. Given Dad's personality, my mother explained that she had anticipated his statement and advised him to renew his passport first if it was abroad. To be honest, I wanted to go too. I then signaled to my mother to take me with her by raising my hand. However, she dismissed it right away, convincing me of the value of completing college. My goal of relocating abroad was abruptly dashed. Even after that, my mom continued to travel all over the world for work, and Dad always went with her. My parents left me in our home in the United States so that I could continue to live there, and they moved overseas at ease. Left alone in the family home, I was initially resentful, but soon resolved to make my own way abroad. Somehow I managed to graduate from university, and instead of finding a job, I spent time living abroad in France and Italy. During my time in France and Italy, I only worked day jobs and part-time, which makes me realize now that I virtually had no employment history. I don't know why, but belatedly I couldn't help but feel a flicker of doubt, wondering if everything was going to be all right. With these anxieties in my heart, I reassured myself that everything would be fine because I'd passed the document screening. I then headed toward the company for the interview, once again encouraging myself. "Mr. Harris, please come this way." I checked in at the reception and am guided to a conference room. This time, I'm interviewing with a reasonably large apparel company called Sakura Blooms. The company primarily focuses on products for women and has an overwhelmingly female workforce. There are only a few male employees, and it seems I'm the only one taking the interview this time. Was it because I was applying for a mid-career position? But the job posting said they were hiring 3 people. As my anxiety grew, the door of the conference room where I was suddenly opened with a click. Sorry to keep you waiting. Let's start the interview." The one who appeared was a man whose name tag said Carter. I was initially surprised by his attitude as he entered, but what shocked me even more was his appearance. A gray suit that you can easily find at a big box store. It was so wrinkled, I wondered how it could have been stored to get that way. Even without a close look, it was obvious the buttons were coming undone. And the tie, where on earth do they sell those? It was a strikingly bright fluorescent pink with a cute illustration of a chick with large eyelash eyes right in the center. Where on earth do they sell such ties? Carter, staring at his tie, flashed a grin and said, "This tie? It's unique and stylish, isn't it?" I could only offer a polite smile. His hair was slicked down, either with too much wax or perhaps he hadn't bathed since yesterday. There was a distinct lack of cleanliness about him. I was quite shocked by Carter's reaction. Then he looked at me and sighed. Then I was suddenly asked, "You're a guy, right?" I could only reply with a hesitant, "Yes, I am." I wondered if he mistook me for a woman. "Do you understand that our brand primarily focuses on women's clothing, and still you applied for the job?" "Yes, of course." "Why? There are plenty of men's brands out there. Why did you specifically apply to ours?" "Oh, is the interview already starting?" With that thought, I shared the reasons for my application that I had come up with myself. "I'm interested in working at your company to deepen my knowledge about clothing and fashion." "Oh, okay." A remarkably uninterested response came back. "Is this an interview? What's going on here? What other brands do you know? You're not just aware of our brand, are you?" "Certainly not. If your company targets the same demographic." Hot Cheer, Emo, and Earth Shop have recently become popular. They offer products with a casual yet work-appropriate design, incorporating sophisticated colors and styles. If we target a slightly older age group, it is popular for its wide range of colors and ease of reuse. When I answered, Carter showed a momentary surprised expression. He had a look on his face as if he didn't expect I had been studying women's apparel brands. "It's a job interview, so you should study for it." Well, you should be able to answer that much. Now let's talk about your work history." "What's your work history?" "Yes, I've been overseas until recently. I've experienced various jobs in France and full-time positions." "Your resume shows a blank in the work history section." "Oh yes, I mainly work part-time jobs." "Huh. So is this your first job interview then?" "Yes, this is my first job interview for a full-time position." When I answered honestly, Carter looked at me with complete disdain in his eyes. "You were abroad, but you still end up as a part-time? Were you just living off your parents' money?" "No, it's not like that. I had worked part-time jobs during my university years to save money for my overseas experience." You know, people who say they were mostly abroad are kind of loose compared to us Americans. It's a bit worrying. They might be doing their job with a lack of diligence, and I can't trust them. "Well, I'm also an American, but..." "And you, talking all high and mighty about having been abroad. But that's nothing to brag about. I thought from your appearance that you're a bit weak. And lately, there have been too many guys like you. Men should have a strong presence." And he starts eloquently describing his ideal image of a man. I've been listening, but it's starting to become a bit of a confusing conversation. What on earth am I being told? Besides, I hate to say it, but for a guy to actively pursue a company targeted at women, it seems like you have ulterior motives. If you have nothing like that, then prove it. Even if you tell me to prove it, how am I supposed to prove that? You're a guy working in a women's apparel company, aren't you? So we're in the same boat, aren't we? I thought to myself, but before I could say anything, Carter chuckled and said, "What's the matter?" "Can't answer that." I realized it was hopeless. Even if I miraculously passed this interview, I couldn't work with someone like him. Feeling that way, I briefly said, "I've had enough. I don't want to answer anymore," and stood up. I turned my back to Carter and began walking toward the door of the room. "What? Running away? That's what these overseas folks are like." He sneered at me with a smirk on his face. He was a typical unpleasant person. I wondered if he was trying to provoke me and make me react somehow. Even if I was overseas, I didn't expect to be treated like this. I can't work with someone so discriminatory and biased. "I decline a job offer," I said and left the meeting room. As I left, I could hear him still saying, "Young people these days are so arrogant." The next day, as anticipated, I received a rejection notification for the job. My first job interview in the United States had ended abruptly. A few days later, I found myself at my mother's favorite high-quality restaurant. My mother had returned to the United States, and of course, my father had returned as well. Now the three of us are living together in our family home. This restaurant is my mother's favorite. She conducts business negotiations while dining at this restaurant, especially when it's so important she can't fail. She also dines out here with my father for special occasions. Unfortunately, Dad couldn't make it. But I'm happy you're here, so let's enjoy this circumstance. My mom hasn't been to this site for a while, and she's excited to be here again. Additionally, my father couldn't make it because he had a deadline for his work. Well, sometimes you don't get a job offer after an interview. Don't lose heart. Based on what I heard, the problem is on their side, my mother said with a smile. And I realized her intention. I see. She brought me here to cheer me up and encourage me after I'd been brooding about that interview for the past few days. What a wonderful mother I have. I was deeply moved. I said I would decline it by myself, but the truth is, I was a little down about it. Time flies. I thoroughly enjoyed the prix menu at the restaurant and the precious time with my mother. It's on me, so go ahead and wait for a sec outside, my mother said. And as I followed her instructions and changed my shoes at the restaurant's entrance, I saw some people coming in. Among them, there was a person wearing a familiar tie. It was a tie with a glaring fluorescent pink background and a cute illustration of a chick with long eyelashes and big eyes in the center. I had seen that tie recently. Carter. Today, he's wearing a slightly more decent suit than the other day, but he still can't cover the wrinkles. You know, more than that, the tie is way too conspicuous and has an incredible presence. That chick even appeared in the dream the day I interviewed. It's likely to come out again tonight. Then, it seemed like Carter also noticed me. He said, well, isn't this Mark, the overseas Rory we interviewed the other day? What a coincidence. Being able to come to such a nice place on a weekday. Overseas Rurys indeed stand out, huh? Have you gotten missing American food? Did you remember how to munch on that? He was clearly picking a fight with me. That last part sounded like baby talk. Don't bother me. It's so annoying, even just he remembers my name. As I was pondering what to say, my mom appeared and said, sorry for keeping you waiting, Mark. I got a souvenir for Dad. It took time a bit, sorry about that. In her hand, she's holding a paper bag. This is probably the sushi from this restaurant. While I was eating, she said, Dad is also a big fan of the sushi here. Should we buy some as souvenirs? It seems like she really ordered it. Is this Mark's mother? Carter suddenly asked. Against my hope, she replied, yes, that's right. What? As I supposed. May I ask, is it you who paid the restaurant bill? He suddenly asked my mother. What's going on? What is he trying to say? Yes, that's right, my mother replied. Huh, I knew it, he exclaimed dramatically, sighing deeply. Then he looked at me and said, is dining on your mom yummy, Mark the Jobless? Furthermore, he said to my mother, it's no good, even for you. If you spoil this jobless guy, he will turn out worse. My mother and I were left speechless. Carter himself had this attitude like he was saying something great, sporting a smug look. Mark, is this the person who interviewed you the other day? Oh yeah, I don't know why he's here. As my mother and I were secretly discussing this, my mother smiled and said, got it. Leave it to me. Oh, this mom's face is dangerous. Battle mode activated. Excuse me, but who are you referring to as a jobless guy? Of course you know, that's your son. You've really spoiled him to the core. It seems that your son tried to join our company, but unfortunately, he couldn't break out of being the jobless. Carter laughed loudly. My mother had a beaming smile on her face, but she was clearly radiating an aura of anger that was palpable. Even I, who was standing side by side, noticed it. Why doesn't he realize, right in front of her? Carter, what's going on? I heard a male voice coming close. Looking in the direction of the voice, a man in a suit was approaching. Compared to Carter, the suit is wrinkle-free and looks clean, and he's carrying off a suit in a color that suits him well. At first glance, I got the impression that he was someone in a higher position, like CEO? President Adams. How are you today, sir? Greeted Carter. Oh, he really is the president. In the next moment, the man addressed as the president looked at my mother and exclaimed, President Harris. Oh, President Adams, isn't it? It's been a while. I didn't expect to meet you before the upcoming meeting, my mother said with a beaming smile. President Adams responded, I would really appreciate your assistance in the upcoming meeting, while bowing graciously. President Adams, no matter how you look at it, appeared humble toward my mother, and the power dynamic was clearly in favor of my mother. President Adams looked at Carter and said, Carter, offer your greetings. This lady is President Harris, the head of that Striped Group. The Striped Group. The Striped Group is a company that oversees dozens of apparel manufacturers in the United States. In fact, my mother is the president of the group, holding the position of the head of a so-called major company, the Striped Group. Oh, as I mentioned before, We're going to come under the management of them. Make sure to greet her properly. Really? That's news to me. I asked my mom. That's right. Starting from this spring, we're in the process of moving that forward. Now. Oh, President Adams, this is my son. I greeted President Adams in person. Are you President Harris's son? I'm always grateful for her help. It's a bit embarrassing, but our business has many vulnerabilities, and, well, to cover those, she's taking care of it. I see. Although it looked like the business was doing well from the outside, it seemed that wasn't the case in reality. And so far, Carter had remained silent. When I looked at him, his face was turning paler than before. As President Adams said, "What's the matter, Carter? Why don't you greet?" My mother cut in with her words, No, it's quite all right. We already exchanged greetings earlier with this gentleman, so there's no need. Besides, Carter is one of your employees, isn't he? My son actually had an interview at your company recently, and it seems they took good care of him. My mother said with a beaming smile. Wow, really? Does that mean your son will be joining our company? That's fantastic news. It's great to have such strong talent on board. No. It seems my son actually declined the offer on his own. I only heard about it from him, but it seems he didn't quite meet the standards over there, according to the person who conducted the interview. Really? But your son's been overseas. Oh yeah. Unfortunately, it seems he didn't meet the standards of yours, so he didn't seem to have a connection with your company during the interview. And even just now, the interviewer referred to my son as a jobless. What? Did our Carter really say something like that? Yes. Well, it's true that my son is unemployed while he's job hunting, so he's somewhat like a jobless. But it's a bit much for someone to say that, and it makes me wonder about the company's future. When my mother deliberately said that, President Adams turned pale too and glared at Carter. Carter, how dare you? And no, President Adams, this. Carter seemed to be trying to come up with an excuse, but his face was turning increasingly pale, and he was completely stumbling over his words, repeating, "It's not like what you think." If you're interviewing with that kind of attitude, I think no one would want to work here, I chimed in. I don't know how much President Adams is aware, but Sakura Blooms Inc. has a reputation, not in a good way, on the job information sites. Some reviews mention that there was a harsh interviewer. And even if you pass the interview, C in the HR department has been getting trashed in reviews. Also, the turnover rate was unusually high. That's why I was curious about what it was like, so I decided to try it out. And after that interview, I understood. Probably, they had been rejecting people in a similar manner all along. I guess for the past few years we've been shorthanded in a way that's rarely seen. I always thought we had a shortage of manpower, but it seems it was because of him. I left all these things to Carter, so I didn't know anything about the situation. I'm terribly sorry for that. President Adams lowered his head toward me. Judging by his attitude, it seemed he really didn't know about the interview. He's not at fault. Even seeing President Adams in this situation, the Carter in question remained silent the whole time. President Adams is someone to look up to. So Carter, why don't you apologize? Seeing the situation get out of hand, I couldn't help but speak up. Suddenly, Carter burst out. You lazy bum. Don't get smart with someone older than you. And lunged at me. But I easily dodged him with a quick move. Carter slid smoothly and suddenly tumbled onto the floor. Well, President Adams, if this person isn't dealt with properly, our company might not be able to welcome yours. Laughing merrily, my mother spoke, and President Adams nodded solemnly in response. Of course. Carter, you're fired as of today. I am. Carter, lying down, lifted his face, but his complexion had already turned ashen. Oh dear. Oh my. It seems like you've become a jobless, dear. My mother chuckled at that. A few days later, an article appeared in the finance newspaper with the headline, Women's apparel manufacturer Sakura Blooms, Inc. joins the Striped Group. In addition, several other apparel and textile companies were acquired, leading to more companies coming under the management of the Striped Group. Generally, joining a group doesn't change the management lineup of each company. But I heard that Carter was the only one who got fired. Apparently, the reason why Carter conducted interviews in such that manner was simply because he disliked anyone who seemed more competent or superior to himself. He wanted to fulfill the feeling of I'm the one choosing here. President Adams really trusted Carter, so he left all personnel matters to him, only requiring retroactive reports. I'll be more involved from now on, he said, reflecting on the situation afterward. I ended up joining my mother's company, the Striped Group, as an employee. However, I didn't give up on my own dream. In fact, I was more determined than ever to pursue my dream by working in this company, learning about clothing, and dealing with customers in the stores. A few more years passed, and I handed in my resignation to my mother, who was the president. President Harris, I'd like to resign. When I said that firmly, my mother looked at me. Do you already have plans for the next one? I want to pursue my own dream. I've made plans for it. Good. You should do what you love, work hard, and I'll support you. With those words from my mother, I left the Striped Group. And then, I finally launched my dream brand called Colorado. I handled everything from design to sales by myself. In fact, during the 5 years I spent studying in France and Italy after graduating from university, I underwent training to become a designer. While studying at the university's economics department, I had continued to think about clothing design on my own and even made clothes. However, I wanted to learn in a more formal setting. So, right after graduating, I decided to go to France. Thanks to my mother's connections, I was introduced to world-renowned designers in both France and Italy, where I worked part-time and continued to study. The reason I had no work history was because of this background. I studied design in France for 3 years and Italy for 2 years each, gaining recognition from my respective mentors, and then returned to the United States. I cannot thank my mother enough. She had introduced me to my design mentors. And I'm also grateful to my father for allowing me to pursue my passion. Actually, I wanted to learn from another company before starting my own brand, so I applied to Secura Blooms Incorporated. Now let's just forget about that. My knowledge of business from university turned out to be quite useful when I started my own brand. I realized that there were no wasted experiences in life. The concept of my brand is break down gender barriers. It's about wearing whatever you like, regardless of gender. If a man wanted to wear a skirt, he should be able to. And women should be free to wear men's clothing. I embedded these ideas into my clothing designs. In line with this era, we plan to primarily use materials that consider SDGs and, initially, limit sales to online. In fact, I didn't have enough money to open a store. To my delight, my brand seemed to align with the current social climate, and I quickly gained attention. I received heartwarming comments from consumers like, "Thanks to Colorado, I've learned the joy of choosing the clothes I love, and I'm happy to have more options in clothing selection." Furthermore, after just 1 year, I was able to open a real store in a local shopping mall, and I could afford to hire employees. While it was a store in a rural area, more people came with the intention of buying my clothes. I was also fortunate enough to be featured in many fashion magazines, both domestically and internationally, which further boosted my brand sales. Having established an apparel brand, my next dream was to participate in Paris Fashion Week. I had been to Paris Fashion Week just once when I was a child, accompanied by my mother. The memory of that moment is still vividly etched in my mind. Glamorous clothing, makeup, and models striding confidently. And finally, the designer who greets us. It was a dazzling world. At that moment, following my gut instinct, I decided that someday I would see a model wearing my designs on that same runway. That was the moment when I first dreamed of becoming a designer. I continued working towards that goal, and a few years later, my brand was finally able to participate in Paris Fashion Week. In that glamorous moment, my excitement soared as I realized I could participate. I went wild, shouting woohoo, and the whole day, the employees at the main store had a blast together. Of course, the next day, I had a hangover. I ended up spending busy days every day preparing for Paris Fashion Week, but I didn't mind it at all because I believed my dream would come true. Rather, the feeling of enjoyment was dominant. I was often caught up in preparations, even staying overnight at the store. My parents were worried, but more than that, they warmly watched over me. Finally, the day of Paris Fashion Week arrived. The show was a great success, and my brand became internationally famous. I was called to the runway by a model who was wearing clothes from my brand. While walking and waving my hand, I heard someone shout, "Mark." When I turned toward the voice, I found my parents there. My mother was waving her hands enthusiastically with a big smile, while my father stood beside her, looking a bit embarrassed, waving his hand timidly. I was touched by my mom's appearance there. Moreover, my father, who rarely appears in public, had come all this way for me. The fact made me so happy that I couldn't help but tear up. I realized that I want to stand here again and again, next year, the year after, and for the years to come. I think that would surely be worth repaying my parents. My parents raised me with respect, letting me pursue my passions. I owe it to my parents for who I am today. To tell the truth, at one point I almost gave up on my dream of becoming a designer when heading off to university. But now, I'm here as a designer launching my own brand. I realize that if you don't give up and keep putting in effort, dreams will come true. I believe that looking at things with rigid, outdated values in today's world is not beneficial for anyone. For example, concepts like being manly or being womanly probably won't hold in the future. Incorporating and embracing diversity is what gives rise to the potential and growth that follows. I pledge in my heart to continue creating fashion that embraces diversity and incorporates various elements in the future.